a decision is made because of fear. My grandmother
True.
used to say that fear is a made up emotion that we make up to keep us from doing anything. Think about that for a moment. You know, somebody asks you to do something, the first thing you get is fear. Okay, is it going to work? If it's not going to work, is it good or is it bad? Okay, I have no fear. The decision was simple for me. Here I am in a field that I don't have a clue about, but it's a field that I'm in. Okay, in order for me to be successful, I have to understand the industry that I'm in. Okay, many times we hear people want to open up a business and they don't want to get no experience in the business. They just want to open the business because they saw somebody else do the business. Now, I'm not a proponent of volunteering for a business and then opening a business. I'm not a proponent of working for a business and starting a business. But I'm a proponent of looking at what the blueprint is and creating a blueprint of that business and studying that business from their business plan to their annual report so that you know exactly what they're doing to get wealthy because they're getting wealthy. They're not in business just to do work. They're in business to get wealthy. You know,
Yeah.
there's nothing wrong with volunteering. There's nothing wrong with working for the company and starting your company. But if you bought some stock in your competition, that competition is going to send you all of their information, their annual report, and everything and how they do business. If you got that information on your competitor, guess what? You can compete
Yes.
with wealth building, not hustle building, but wealth building. And so, me making all the decisions that I've ever made have been decisions because I'm looking at where I'm going, not where I'm at. That's
Exactly.
that is the difference between becoming wealthy and becoming a hustler. You know, I'm doing a show, an art show in October. I get a phone call about this art show that I'm doing in October on yesterday. And I'm having a conversation, and the person says, then what are you doing about this art show? And I say, what I'm planning for the art show right now. He said, well, it's in October. And I said, well, from right now to October, there's a lot of money on the table. See, you're not thinking about, most people are not thinking about preparation. They're not thinking about the end. What do you want the end to be at that show? When you look at your business, you need to look at what do you want to be the final analysis of this show or this business that you're doing. Do you want this business to be sold? Do you want to give it to your family? Is this a legacy business? What's next after this business that you have created is to the point that you can only carry it to.
And what I've noticed and what I've had to learn essentially, because my experience was that, and I'm going to go back to being an artist, and we're gonna do a part two because we gotta bring you back for being an artist, okay? But what I noticed in being an artist, I had my moment, I had my aha moment, and that aha moment, at I was in the Conservatory of Music at Oberlin College in Ohio, and I was looking at the billboard for jobs, and the billboard had an article on it about what you can anticipate making as an operatic performer.
Mhm.
And it said, if you get into the New York Metropolitan Opera, and again, and I'm going to date myself, this was back in the 80s.
Mhm.
If you get into the Met, your annual salary will be about $3,000.
Mm,
And I almost fainted
mm,
right in that spot. I couldn't move for several minutes. And I thought, I don't know if I can do this. I don't want to wait tables. That's not what I signed up for. I signed up to be on stage.
mm-hmm.
I didn't want to necessarily um leave the United States, because I knew a lot of people would travel abroad or whatever. I was in Ohio. I was in Michigan. I wanted to start my career here. And it really, really floored me. I think the advantage, or probably because you had people in your life that were business oriented, you automatically thought, well, there's an option for
Mm-hmm.
me, for you. And I really wasn't sure what my option was going to be at that time. So decisions are really important. Vision is the other thing that you mentioned about, and being able
Okay,
to look ahead.
but I got
And
to,
yes,
but I got to go back to what you just said.
okay.
You looked at the billboard and you saw $3,000 annually. Okay, and this is so powerful. When I was in college, my and I said earlier in this broadcast that I wanted to get back to leadership. And what you're talking about now is leadership. You
Mhm.
didn't have any leaders around you to say to you, here were the other options. Here was the other things that you could do with your great voice, with your great talent as an artist. Here was how you could earn more than 3,000, how you could possibly earn millions and millions of dollars with your talent. Because other people was earning millions and millions of dollars with their voice or with their talent. Okay. My counselor said that most artists were going to be starving artists. I heard that. Okay. I took what he said as this is the truth. Okay. Now, it was the biggest lie told to me on the planet at that time because he was a failed artist. Okay. So the starving artist moniker was easy for him. You have to understand, I started at 4. And when I got to college, I'm not saying I was this great artist, but I was practicing like this is all I'm going to do. As a matter of fact, I flunked the 5th grade because I went to school every day and drew and slept and drew and ate and drew and slept all that whole year. And my grandmother asked me when I came home, she said, how did you flunk the 5th grade? What did you do? And because she bring out the drop cord or whatever she had to bring out to get I'm a boy. I said to her exactly what I did. She said to me, I've always told you, showing up, you get a C. You get a C for showing up.
Right.
Just showing up, you get a C. And then she said, when you go back to school next year, they're going to pick on you because you flunked. What she didn't know, I was a bully. I was a little bad boy. I was one of the bad boys. So if you was gonna talk some junk about me, you ready to fight. I'm fighting you. Anyway, so I wasn't worried about that. But when the counselor told me that most artists was gonna be a starving artist, and then I grew through my process and I broke records in advertising, I broke records in TV, I broke records in radio. I'm breaking all records. And, I mean, I'm him. I'm not worried about what I'm doing. I'm just doing what I'm doing.
Hmm.
I was on the phone with one of my collectors because I only sell to collectors. And I was talking to Gerald, and Gerald said, who's the living artist making the most money? And immediately I know who that is. And I say, the Kende Wiley. Because at that moment that we was on the phone, the Kende Wiley was making $500,000 paintings. Okay, he was doing sculpture and making tons of money. So I said to Kenny Wiley, and he said, "You don't know nothing." He had just purchased a $7,000 painting from me. He was one of my collectors. You got to understand, I'm still you're a collector. You're paying me, so I'm in with you because I'm looking at when is the next piece you gonna buy. Okay, and he said, "You don't know nothing," and hung up. Gerald knew how. Well, people that know me know that I'm a research dog. So Gerald knew what I was going to do. I got on the internet that day. This is about 20 years ago. I got on the internet that day and I scoured the internet to find out who was the number one living black artist and how much money was they making. And when I got on the internet, remember we're talking about leaders. We're talking about what we're looking at. Just as you looked at that $3,000, I looked at that. I'm gonna be a starving artist. Okay, say no different. You decided to do something else and you went down another path. I decided to do something else and I went down another path. My point is, when I found out that, and I cried that day, I found out that the living African American artist was making $12 million a painting. I'm going to say that to you one more time. And I'm going to tell you, and y'all can go and look him up. His name is Mark Bradford. Mark is making $12 million a painting. I studied this dude from 8 o'clock in the morning to 8 o'clock at night. Everything he ever said, every video he ever had, every news item that he had, every article that's ever been written on him, I studied that for 8 hours because I was so upset to understand how he was making $12 million as an artist and still living. And so what I discovered is this: networking, 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 networking changed his life.
Yes. Okay.
Had nothing to do with his skill, had nothing to do with his art, had something to do with his networking and the people that he met through his journey to get to 12 million. Now, another reason I cried is because I wanted to be a basketball player, a football player. I wanted to be a singer. I wanted to be a dancer. I wanted to be all of these things. And here I am drawing with both of my hands, ambidextrous. Here I am using these hands and got the goal right here in my hands.
Right.
And the leadership, and this is what I say to people, you got to really sit back and try to figure out, is somebody telling you something they know or something that they thinking? Because everybody, as my great grandfather said, everybody got an opinion.
Right.
The question becomes, why am I even thinking about playing basketball if I know I can make $12 million a painting?
Right.
Why am I even thinking about football? Why am I even why am I doing advertising? Okay. Why I'm on radio? Why I'm on TV? Why I'm in the news? Why I'm doing all this other stuff when I can just draw and paint and earn that
Yeah.
money? Okay. Now let's fast forward it because I know we got to get out of here. Let's fast forward it. Okay. Decision. Okay. What decision did I make in spite of me not being able to follow my dream, my real dream, which is to become one of the greatest artists that ever lived? Okay. I made a decision with myself to draw and paint every day, to draw every day, to do art every day, to draw no matter what, to draw every day. because I want to be one of the greatest artists that ever lived. Okay. So I needed to go through the process of understanding how to get to being one of the greatest artists that ever lived. And what that meant was, how could I come up with my identity as an artist in this space called art? That's critical. Okay, you're a singer. Okay, if I said Patti LaBelle, you know what she sounds like instantly. If I said Natalie, if I said Beyonce, if I said um, any of these great women, you already know who they are and what their style is and what their identity is.
Right.
That's the same thing in art. If you say Ernie Barnes, you already know who Ernie is. If you say Romare Bearden, you know who Romare Bearden. If you say Michelangelo, you know who he is. If you say Van Gogh, you know who these guys are. They have gone through their process to create an identity for who they are. And so
Right.
that's what I decided to do as an artist. And I have gone through art until now I'm a master artist. And I have created an identity for what I do and what I do as an artist. And I have moved from realism to abstract expressionism into total abstraction. And I have a body of work that shares that whole breadth of my work. And that is the piece that I challenge everybody on today. What is the breadth of your work that you've done in the dash that you're on the planet?
And we're going to present you as the artist, as an artist in our next segment with you, Dr. Kelly. This has been so enlightening. Totally. I mean, so many nuggets, so much information that people can glean from to have a vision for their life, to have a vision for their journey on their business journey, or and their artist journey as well, because we want to make sure that the artists that are picking up on this are going to see that there is a business behind this too. There is no such thing as a starving artist.
It's
There is only you being able to use your talent, your gift to create the legacy and the financial revenue that you choose, that you want to have in this lifetime. So I want to thank you so much, Dr. Eric Kelly, for joining us for this first for part one of Dr. Eric Kelly III. And we will be back again to have all the wonderful knowledge of you as an artist. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Well, I want to thank you for having me on Favorite Night TV. I'm just overjoyed to be on stage. It's been great. I know we didn't get to the Black Business Olympics, and the Black Business Olympics is going to be held. Um, it's going to be held July the 28th through August the 3rd. You'll
Yes.
be able to get it on Favorite Night TV along with 24 other outlets that you'll be able to see us. And for those who have never heard of it, you can go to your YouTube channel, your Facebook channel, and type in Black Business Olympics. We have more than 10,000 videos of business owners who are out there talking about how to do business with them. For those who need to know more about my art, you can go to the Eric Kelly Museum.org, or you can just type in Eric Kelly III. I am Googleable. You can do that and it'll go right directly to what I do. And again, I want to thank you for being on the show. And I want to say to all of the artists out there, um, you have a voice. Stop cheating the world, as my mama would say to me sometimes. My mother wanted me to be this great singer, you know, and I will never forget after I told her I wanted to be an artist, She said, but you can sing. And how it was presented to me didn't allow for me to think like I think today, because my great grandfather wanted me to be a lawyer. And he just brought those big books into my room and said, that's what I want you to be. But my grandmother instilled into me to stand up for myself. And I want you artists to stand up for yourselves and share your voice and stop cheating the world. As I was talking about my mother, as I've gotten older, she said to me, she said, I wanted you to sing, but I got a question for you. She said, you've seen all the singers, you've seen all the dancers. She said, who would have been your competition? And I said to my mama, and this is the kind of brain that I have. And you're gonna say, wow. I said, my competition would have been Michael Jackson. I said I would have dusted him.
Woo!
And when I said it to my mama, mama said, you sure would if you had followed what I asked you to do, to sing. That is that is the mentality that you have to have with who you are.
Yeah.
Your limited beliefs and how you feel about yourself and how your friends and how the rate everybody's telling you, you got to get away from that. You got to think like a billionaire, because you are a billion dollar bill, business. 400 million people, excuse me, 400 million sperm cells were released at one time, and you were able to come to this planet. You hit the ultimate lottery. What are you going to do with the ultimate lottery being here with the time you have on the planet? That is what I'd like to leave your audience with today.
Well, thank you so much again for those amazing words. We appreciate you so much. Again, tell us how people can get in touch with you.
They can get in touch with me by dialing 919-308-9090. That's 919-308-9090. For those who would like to email me, you can email me at erickelly45 at gmail. That's erickelly45 at gmail. And as I continue to say my quote, my eternal quote is, what you're looking for is looking for you. And my father would say to each and every one of you, my grandfather, my great grandfather, if you don't value your value, then your value is not valuable.
Dropping the mic. Thank you so much, Dr. Kelly. We appreciate you so much. We'll get that. We're gonna. This is just part one, so we're excited to bring you back.
And thank you again so very much. I'm telling you, Fave Unite TV, one of the greatest content creating television stations in the world. Sign in today. If you are creative, you creating content and you worrying about people shadow banning you and not getting your information out there and you not having your voice heard and you got all this greatness to give, sign up today on Fave Unite TV. And check out my channels on Fave Unite TV. Check out my poetry channel. Check out I'm not going to let them know, my channel where I'll be singing. Check out my art channel. Check out my film channel. Check out as we say, the EK3 project. Check it
Yes.
out, because that's what it's about. We're on Fave Unite TV, and you should be too.
Thank you, Dr. Kelly. Have a wonderful day. And thank you, audience, for watching. Until next time on stage on Fave Unite TV, check us out on faveunitetv.com, faveunite.com. Don't forget about our radio station, faveunitefm.com, and listen to some wonderful music and podcast, Wombology by Enolia Foti, and our masterclass, Dorez Douglas, is on faveunite.com. Have a wonderful day, everybody, and thanks again for watching.
Hi, I'm Eric Kelly III, and today I'd like to introduce you to my art. Welcome to the Eric Kelly III Museum, located in Durham, North Carolina. Today we're going to be discussing my art, my journey, and where I'm going next. You know, the past, the today, and the future. When I think about the beginning of my work, I have to go all the way back to when I was about 4 years old. And my grandmother gave me a pen, and I was in church. And I took that pen and I began to draw. And as I was drawing, later on, my grandmother said that the picture that I drew then looked like the choir that was in the church. And so my affinity for utilizing the ink pen to do work still happens today. Now, many times when we begin to talk about art, the question always is, what is the intent? Why do you do art? What makes you an artist? And so, as we look at my early years, I was not thinking about what I was drawing. I was just in love with drawing. I remember in the 5th grade when a young man, one of my friends, came to my desk and saw me drawing, and he said he'd like to draw. And so I said to him, anyone can draw. Because in my mind as a young kid, my art was just a way of, I would say, expressing how I felt. And so each day I would give him triangles and squares and show him how to draw. And so in my mind, I wanted to be an art teacher. And being an art teacher, I thought I could give back to other young people, other folk, how I felt about art. And so as we moved through my timeline and moved past the 5th grade, I began to draw, I would say, comic book figures, you know, a lot of figures, a lot of pictures of what I saw in comic books. And one of the things that I noticed about me at an early age, maybe it was because my grandmother was a civil rights leader, maybe it was because my great-grandfather wanted me to be a lawyer, and he took me each day from Scarborough Nursery School down to the courthouse to watch what was going on at the courthouse. And maybe it was me watching television and seeing the civil rights movement happening, and seeing things that was going on. But I remember when I was about 12 that there was this thing called identity. You know, say it loud, I'm black and I'm proud. And the music that I was hearing was just so different until I began to change the white images that I looked at to black images. I can remember the Incredible Hulk that I changed into the Incredible Bulk. You gotta understand, I was a kid, you know. Tarzan. I did Tarzan wrestling with an alligator in the jungle with an afro. And so this whole thing of black identity was prevalent on my mind as a young artist. Many times people say artwork is political. And I continue to say that not only artwork is political, art is what is your identity, but more importantly, what is your intention. And so as I moved through those years, 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th grade, I began to look at the difference between how I felt and how I saw things. And one of the things that I noticed early on is that I could actually hear tones and hear music and I would see colors in terms of what I was drawing. Many times I found myself talking to people and I would say, um, um, I can draw you if I think about you. And that was one of the games I used to play when I was a young kid. I would talk to somebody, I would listen to them, and then I would go home and I'd get my sketch pad and I would actually draw them. Many times when I was coming up, I used to tell people that if you talk about what you want, I could draw some lines, and then I can go and create that particular object. Intention, identity, and color was very prevalent in my work at an early age. I remember my first paper mache dog that I did. It was white, and my teacher kept the paper mache dog. And my great grandfather used to say to me that don't give my artwork away. And so he said only sell to collectors. And so at 7 years old, he started a museum for me called the Eric Kelly III Museum that would house my artwork in his house, along his halls, and house my writings. I'm also a poet. I do poetry, 3 portrait CDs that I've done in the past, along with some more interesting writing. My work, again, as I said before, is about identity and intention. When you think about colors, and we will see some of those pieces later on, but the colors and portraiture that I've moved into, very, very important. Initially, I was doing a lot of figuration, and that figuration was a lot of history pieces. Now, fortunate for many artists, they have what I would say some guidance, some leadership. When I was growing up, once I got to the 12th grade, 3 of my teachers, Sandra Dowd, Miss Corbett, and Miss Cousins, pulled me into the teacher's lounge. And my art teacher, Sandra Dowd, said to me that I was cheating the world because I was not doing enough art. And she said each day that she give out a project, that I would come in the day of the project and do the best piece in the school. And I used to think about that because I wasn't really aware in terms of my art. I just was doing art. And so my English teacher said that, well, this year you're not going to graduate. And my history teacher says, that is correct, you're not going to graduate. And so you got to understand, back in those days, graduation, senior year was very important. And so what I did was I said to them, y'all can't do that. And they said, yes, we can, because we control your grades. And so I sat there and I listened to them as they began to tell me what they wanted me to do my senior year so that I could do more art. And many times when you have people that come into your life and say they want you to do something and you have your own mission and ideas of what you want to do, sometimes you just, don't do it. But in those days, I was the guy who was very popular in high school. So I thought to myself, this is only a challenge. And so each morning, I would draw for my English class, the Macbeth, the Odyssey. For my history class, which was a Black history class, I would draw about the transatlantic slave trade, great African Americans who went on before, like Crispus Attucks, Martin Luther King, Marcus Mosiah Garvey, Malcolm X. And these are the kind of pictures that I was drawing. They were historical figures. And I found myself doing the work late at night and bringing those pieces to high school and give them to the teachers the day of. And I think those teachers thought that by me doing the work that I was doing, that I was giving the work to them. But as I said before, my great grandfather said, don't give your work away. Um, Always sell your work for what it's worth. And more importantly, sell to collectors. And so the Eric Kelly Museum has been a private museum only selling to collectors. And so when the end of the year came, I had drawn enough work to fill a whole hallway in the high school. And as I said before, I started out doing figuration and doing historical pieces. And I hadn't yet started thinking about what my intent was going to be. Why was I doing the work? I was doing the work because I was asked, not because there was this urge deep down inside saying, I'm going to draw all of this work. And so at the end of the year, I received the Links Best Artist in the State. And this is what has propelled me to become the artist I am today. I looked at the art award that I received, and I thought about where did I want to go to college. And so I had letters coming to me. I was in the news, I was on television, and all these great things. I had these things to happen. And so I had letters coming to my house to go to different schools. And my great-grandfather used to say there are 5 things that you need to think about as you live. He said number 1 is to think. Number 2 is to sell something. Number 3 is to do research. Number 4 is to be relentless. Number 5 is to have energy in everything that you do. And so I started on my quest for understanding that art was going to be what I wanted to do. And so I did research on the schools in Durham, North Carolina. And for those who don't know about Durham, North Carolina is a space where black people, 49% black people, were engaging in economics everywhere. You know, Durham was the tobacco capital of North Carolina at one time. And so when I was a young man and I lived in Federal Street Projects, I could walk down to Pettigrew Street, not to Parish Street, because Parish Street is considered Black Wall Street now. But before Parish Street, there was Pettigrew Street. And on Pettigrew Street was Service Printing, black men owned it. The Regal Theater, black man owned it. The Barber Shop, WAFR, and the taxi cabs. And I could see black people doing great things right there on Pettigrew Street. And Pettigrew Street was probably about 4 or 5 blocks from where I stayed. I remember going to the Regal Theater, seeing Hercules and all these movies as a young man. But the thing that really impressed me about Pettigrew Street was I saw black people doing black things. And so as I did my research to see where I was going to go to school, I discovered that North Carolina Central University was one of the top schools with black professors. And one of the things that I wanted to do, you know, as a young person is I wanted to go to a school where I could study in the class, and then I also could go to the library and pick their books up and read more about what they were talking about, so I would be immersed into the art. And so at that time, North Carolina Central University did not have an art scholarship program. And so remember what I said earlier about my great-grandfather. He said think, and then sell, and do research. And so in doing my research and thinking, I said to myself, I want to take my portfolio down and ask them to come to that school for art. Now, many people don't know, and I didn't know at the time, that Ernie Barnes, who is one of the greatest artists who've ever come out of Durham, North Carolina, didn't know that Ernie Barnes had gone to North Carolina Central University. That was not, in my mind, something that I knew. I was an artist who was influenced by the people that I knew, not the books that I read, but the people that I actually knew. And so I took my portfolio down to Atlanta Henderson at North Carolina Central University. My portfolio was full of historical art, as I said before, because that's all I was doing. Many times you hear the idea that all art is political art. While I wasn't thinking my art was political, my art was always about identity as a black man, as a black person, as a black entity on the planet. And so I left my portfolio with Dr. Henderson, and a week passed, and they sent me a letter offering me an art scholarship at North Carolina Central University. This was probably one of the greatest days of my life. As my grandmother at the time said to me, she said, well, since you're going to school for free, I'm going to give you the family car. And you know, when you're thinking about your life and how things transpire to get you where you're going, these are the kinds of things that move you to believe in yourself. My grandmother used to say, you can do anything that you want to do. Just stand up for yourself and do it. And so, with that being said, my grandmother gave me the family car, and off to North Carolina Central University I was. And, you know, one of the first heartaches that I would say that I had at North Carolina Central University was the whole I'm on art scholarship. And why I say it was a heartache is because the other students that was in school in those days, they knew I was on art scholarship. I didn't know they knew I was on art scholarship. So when classes began and I was asking the other students about painting, because in high school I had done 3 paintings, hadn't done a lot of painting. As a matter of fact, I was self-taught for my painting. My art teacher, Sandra Dowd, said to me, and I'll never forget it, she said, you're an artist. I don't have to tell you what to do. Just take the paint and put it on the canvas and you will figure it out. And that was my first foray into painting. And I did pretty good. I created an abstract. I created a couple other paintings, and I was doing pastels at the time. And pastels was my first love after pencil and ink pen. And so what I did was I utilized my pastel skills as a way of painting. So when you actually see some of my painting, it looks like pastels, because that's how I mix, that's how I match my colors, that's how I draw, that's how I utilize my line work on my paintings, just like pastels. And we'll get an opportunity to see some of those things as we move forward.